aura of my performance, or the image that I try to create the performance, is actually spectacular because of this issue of decolonization. The colonial period has a lot of effects on our psychological structure, and that make us go down in our feelings. And in order for me to feel the majestic nature of the continent, I have to create my image to be spectacular, consciously using the image from my root. What you saw was actually influenced by the culture of Yoruba. Our performance from the traditional aspect is spectacular. One, I am a Yoruba man, an African person, and secondly, my contemporary training is in visual arts. And so I constantly try to create visual image, and which in every angle, in every shot you are seeing an image that aesthetically appealing. That is one. But that does not mean that is my main focus. As an African person and picking from African culture, we are not doing art for art's sake. The aesthetic aspect of it is not my ultimate intention. And my ultimate intention is to create a dialogue between the work and the audience.
Can you explain what you mean by that and how your form fits into that?
In our higher financial capitalist system, we are most inclined into monetary value, and that kills the moral, that kills the ethic values, the social values in us. And so we are constantly in this struggle between the human value and the financial value. And that's also brings us to the point that we need to remind ourselves consistently about the issues that affect our human life. And my performance is actually to create that avenue for dialogue. And so like the one you just saw is about the ecosystem. We are destroying the ecosystem. The problem we have actually in this world now is we are gradually losing our thinking process. We have substituted our thinking into the machine, and we left the machine to think for us. And so when you come into space as an artist, everybody will think, just like you are in the theater, write the script for them, let them read what you're trying to, and at the end of it all, you are not thinking. For example, as an African person, a bird just passed now, a pigeon just passed now. To a traditional African person, it means a lot. It means that the nature is telling you something around yourself with the presence of the bird. But we don't think any longer. We left everything there, like if you see it, like for example, if I walk on the way and I meet snake on the way, and I feel like, what is this snake telling me? But ordinarily we say, wow, I get afraid. Snake, I want to run away. But that is a reason why you meet that snakes on the way. So the same thing is about my performance. When you are confronted with an image, it has a lot of symbols embedded in it. So you are supposed to think about this symbol, and sometimes the symbol doesn't necessarily mean it is an Africa. In the one you saw in Sorbonne, it's about tree. You need to tell yourself, what does tree symbolize in your life? You start from that question, and that will take you along. But we don't want to think. I want to call it the banking system of knowledge, where the knowledge is stored somewhere, and you only go there, pick it when you want to look it. But you don't want to look at your own individual self, because as an individual person, you are being confronted every day with images, and the images registered in your subconsciousness, and each time you need it, unconsciously, you pick it from your archive. And so the same thing happened to the performance. So I use my imagery in the performance symbolically. And for example, when I was offering the leave to individual, and it is symbolical to me as a content of contact between your inner self, that is the audience inner self, and the object which I'm handing over, the heart and the leaf. And it is just to remind you that as a human being, you cannot do without these two things that I give to you. The heart, you work on it every time, and the fruit that comes from the heart and what you eat every time. And so it's a constant dialogue to like show an appreciation, a care for these objects. For example, a Yoruba man will know that when you go to the forest, you need to take a permission to take anything from there. You just don't go there and plug anything. If you plug it there, it will not work for you. So you need to, that means there must be a special respect for this forestry. So, and that's, if you borrow that system from the Africa, for example, then you know how to tender, you know how to care for it. Of course, I cannot detach my experience from my work, because that is what informs who I am. And that's what makes me a Lagosian, for example, because what I see, what I hear, what I experience made up what I am. But some of these issues are globally, when you talk about poverty, for example, in Paris, I was coming out, I have seen almost about 2 or 3 destitutes outside, and each time I walked, I see them there, the same position. So that means they have been sleeping outside. It's just a poverty. Our culture of financial capitalism, and which has killed a lot of things about us. And this is the future of the world. And if you don't start addressing all these now, then we will just find out that in about 33 or 400 years to come, the world will become uninhabitable. I grew up from a community that is agricultural based, which is the typical African community, and I'm used to like living a communal life, and which means that your neighbor is actually part of you, and everybody part of you. And when you do something that is more like a stranger to them, and they want to question you, why are you doing that? What is the meaning of that? And because they have the right to know. And so it is from that context that I also moved into my performance, that I feel it's more comfortable when people ask me questions after the performance, and would try to take it more further. And it is also to let you know also that performance doesn't stop where you finish, it continues. My purpose is to create dialogue, and this dialogue continues. But dialogue continues in every level. If you want to be meaningful, you have to come closer to what they are saying or what they are feeling, and for you to explain to them. You could imagine when I was in the airport coming to Paris, and somebody saw, because I brought a lot of calabash, I brought a cola for the second performance, which was cancelled. Yeah, and they were asking me, are you going for rituals? And I said, yes, of course, rituals of food. And they said, what kind of a food? I said, food from the nature, food that serves as a medicine, But of course, if I want to talk to somebody who has studied food in university, then I go a little bit further. Then I go into the chemical composition of this content that I'm bringing. So which is different from, so you need to understand the consciousness of your viewers, of your audience, and you take the dialogue from that point. About the most meaningful aspect of it, which is that there is the dialogue between me as an artist and as an artwork, with them, which is different from the other art forms where the artwork just exists alone. And each time I try to export my language to another place, I try to find a midway part. And the midway part is the way that each person will try to recognize with his own experience or with our own experience what these forms that I'm creating, what this image I'm creating mean to him or her. I find challenge in the language of spoken language, but not in the forms that I use. Most of my performance, I always consciously, deliberately don't think about them pre the performance, which is a lot of challenge to me. I always, as much as possible, to create the choreography you want to put in that way, the manner of description, at the moment that I start the performance. Because I, most of the time, trying to borrow this idea of the Egungun method. And and the Egungun method does not react, and the Egungun will never tell you that it will move into the space at this particular time and it will start at this particular time. No. They go after they left the courtyard, the spiritual courtyard, and they go into the space, and the space dictates what they do. And that's exactly what I do.
So what do you bring into the space? Because it's not totally improvised.
Yeah, I bring myself and my inner self completely. What I mean by my inner self is there is a lot of the Irumoles, which if I want to say it that way, which some people will call the spiritual master, the angel, but the Yoruba call it Irumole. So, and that is my inner self. And the Irumole work with me in a lot of ways. And so when I come into space, there's a constant dialogue of in myself, and not when I dialogue in inner, I am constantly in the presence of the outer, and which means that I constantly tap from you. When I look at your face, I try to get some energy and what you're expecting from me, and I bring it back into the inner, and it was constant. It's a constant dialogue, and it's constant creation. And of course, just like you say, you're a human being, you will have a pre-plan to say, okay, I'm coming to this place, but does not mean that coming to this place that I have the catalog of what I'm going to do. That is the difference, and that's what Egungun does. But of course, you know what I mean by Egungun, that the Western world called the masquerade, but which I said it goes beyond masquerading, So that is their process. It is a considered process, and sometimes I wonder if I can just tell you verbatim how the last performance I saw, why the funny dialogue that was in my mind. You will laugh,
An example.
Yeah, for example, there was a time that was like, no, you don't need to go this way. You need to go back, then run.
I saw that actually.
Yeah, you could say that sometimes I feel like, okay, no, let me go back this way, and I stop myself. It wasn't deliberate. It was like that dialogue. It's fluid. It's organic thing, and it is something that I sometimes get funny about it. Sometimes I get lost when I want to start. I say, what are you going to do now? I feel lost completely, and when I start, it starts flowing. Now, which sometimes I cannot take credit of that, but I can only say that I am just following my inner self, and make it fluid, and make it really, of course, challenging to my technological self, but which wants me to be like scientific, want to of course, I do a lot of drawings sometimes, and I draw my thing, to see in the preparation for it. But when I start, it's a completely changed. Flows. I would remember in the US when I did Egungun Mandela, that is the second burial of Mandela, and when I was coming to the space, I didn't know there were some kind of a musical performance that was going on, and I got into the space. There was this music that's enveloped the space, and I have to follow that musical thing. So I got into the space with a lot of dance, and the dance was magical, and at the end of it, I asked myself after the performance, where did it come from? Where did that movement come from? And I want to recall that movement, and I cannot. So it is spontaneous. It is the moment, because the moment has its own energy, and we sometimes don't realize what it is over. Every moment has its greatness, has its historical relevancy, has its energy we must tap at. And that is what this contemporary is all about. We must tap into it, we must utilize it, we must use it, because we will never get it any longer. I have done the performance, it is gone, it's ephemeral. Ritually, masquerading, I will call it in my local language, Egungun, Spiritually, it conceals the image of, let's say, the person that embedded that. But in artistic way, it is a deconstruction of the body, and it removes the idea of sex. You don't know who is there. You don't know whether it is a female or male. So it has this energy of humanity. You don't want to know who is there. You don't know whether the person is a female or male or white or black or red or green. And that to me is a point that I want to work with. If you see the image of my work, Jelili Atiku is removed completely from there. An African is removed from there. It is only when you want to now know who is the artist that you begin to have another meaning to it. But confronting the image in the public space, you will not know whether it is Africa or not. Egungun enabled me to deconstruct the identity. And of course, you are now confronting myself, the work, without having that identity attached to it. So to me, it gave me a lot of opportunity to work and to be what I want to be. And sometimes I paint my body, because this black people have this biasness in looking at it and say, oh, it's a black man walking, and they want to give it a different meaning. But when I close the skin, you have an independent conversation with the work, and you get to remove yourself completely from the racism, because we are racist in nature, most of us. A lot of thinking coming into your mind because of this colonialism. Your mind has been colonized. You find it difficult to free yourself from it. So, the Egungun will make you completely, you will not know who is there. It's about the body, and it's about the most dominant forms in my culture, because I went into performance because of my idea of decolonization. I started in around 1992, 1993 in Nigeria, and that was when I was feeling so inferior, inferior to the Western culture. And then I was like, why? What I was looking at it from the concept of the first time word of the Arab word of creation, that said God created human being, and then the Jews or the Romans methodology that God created human beings in the image of God. And I'm trying to look at myself, if I am an image of God and I have this blackness in my skin, and somehow I feel so inferior to some other culture. I said, no, it's not. I am the greatest thing that God ever created. And I said, no, if that is it, then I need to go back to my culture. There's a lot of things there. And the most prominent art forms in my culture is the body, performance. Everything they created go into the body, on the body. And they put a lot of music, a lot of choreography, a lot of poetry, and go into it and become an artwork. And that is why the whole world coming there still, stole a lot of forms from there, and they take it outside. So why am I not borrowing from that? So that was now what led me into now become a performance artist completely. And here I am. So it's paying off. Yeah. The idea is also going back to this decolonization, and I was thinking when I started the idea and I created it in 2011, and I said, let's create the platform for the world to come to Africa, the world to return to Africa, and to have the body talking, to have the body speaking in a visual language, and that's how we started. And the maiden edition was in 2013. And that was in Harare, in Zimbabwe, and it was a lot of eye-opening, and it made me to be confronted with this issue of decolonization. It's very, very deep, and I will share one experience to you. That, for example, I did not attend the festival because of the visa problem, and you could imagine the immigration law in Zimbabwe that allow the Western people to come and get visa at the point of entry, but does not give the African opportunity to come to Zimbabwe in the airport and get visa at the point of entry. You can imagine, it's madness, it's craziness. Water! Initially, when we talk about decolonization in Africa, we will say that we were talking about the influence of the Western world, and we're trying to get away from it. But colonialism is everywhere in the whole world. Even presently, the Western, the citizens of the Western world were actually being colonized by their government for a long time. They misinform them about Africa. They feed them with the wrong information, and it means that they need also to decolonize their own thinking about Africa, for example. And at the same time, we need also decolonize ourselves about our own perception about the Western world. So that's an example.
And ourselves,
yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah, and ourselves, so to speak. And so it is also the same thing. It's just that the manners of description, the manner of explanation could also be different. Colonialism is colonialism everywhere. It may mean to Nigeria, for example, that the Britain colonized us, but when you go to the Britain themselves, they are being colonized by the Britain in a way. So it is a way of a kind of a perspective. You should look at it. You would agree with me that the physically your experiences is loaded in the head. I'm not saying the physical head. I am talking about the points of your reasoning. When somebody who will look at an Asian person, and I said, I don't like this person. It comes from the mind and it comes from the head. So it is that process. It is that where you are picking that knowledge from that I'm questioning, and that's why I'm saying that we're gradually losing it. Because we take a lot of information and we store it there, and we don't want to decolonize it. We let it be there, and we have a stereotype way of doing things, and it is there and stuck in there. I will of course go back to the Yoruba culture that Yoruba believe that the head is the highest in the body, and that's why you see the sculpture, the proportion of the sculpture in the ancient Yoruba, the head is higher, and they're trying to say that the head is the larger part of the body. And of course they are right, and the scientists also prove it, that the brain is where the energy is, and it sends all information, directions to every other, the blood vessel and everything connected to it, the spinal cord connected to it. So that is not it. So let's see the whole thing like that, as the body of knowledge, that it is encaged in somewhere, and there is vessels that are connected to it, and you take it. So your impulse is connected to that, and your impulse is what we're talking about. What is the impulse that brings an action out? There is one factor that control our life, and that is politics, because they make a lot of policies that affect, whether you like it or not. It affects education, it affects social, it affects everything.
And behind it is money.
Yes. And that is the area, and that is why I chose to be political motivated, and my concern is political in my performance, because that is where the big problem lies. A lot of bunch of people who go into the political arena are people who ordinarily were supposed not to go near it. Yeah, honestly speaking, there are these people who are, for example, if somebody who is capitalist oriented deeply go into politics, you will know his policy is going to be capitalism oriented. His education will go into that, and that's where you have a lot of people that students have to pay heavily. They have to borrow money heavily to train themselves, and at the end of it, so they are psychological drained, because they have to think of how to pay back the money. How do you want that kind of a person to be useful to us? And it is because of the policy. There is a lot of colonialism because of money. It's the policy. So this is, to me, I think, the area which I want a lot of change to come in. And what it means that the changes could be, they have to accept the essence of humanity. Purely. You can imagine that I am supposed to do a performance here, and one of it was cancelled. And they said that there was a threat of terrorism. And they never bother what is that performance going to do with them. They should have said, okay, this performance is going to hold, let's channel our energy, bring all our security, go there, mount every security, do the performance, it's going to hold. But say, cancel it. So they never bother whether it is essence of it will benefit the country or the humanity. And so that is the policy. The policy was to use this security threat, and say, no, stop your performance. And you can imagine what the country have deprived my audience of experiencing. So that is so it is a policy. It is a political system that we need to really put our attention on and let it change, because this would now spread all over to the other areas. If we have policies that are humanistic in nature, then we'll become humanity ourselves. So that's just my take on that. If you study Fela's life, you would also discover that he grew up like somebody like myself. He was born in Nigeria, in Abeokuta, and at a time he moved to Europe, perhaps London, I can be sure. And he had a contact with the Western culture. But at a point he realized the essence of Africa, the motherland. And he realized that there's no need for him to become somebody else. That he needs to become who he is. And that he is a Yoruba man to the core. So he moved back to Lagos. And he started studying the Yoruba. And he was not only studying the Yoruba, he was constantly not removing himself for the moments where he was living, when he was living. He was borrowing from the past, bringing to the moment, and he was bringing out a new energy completely, and that make him to become like a universal body. But unfortunately, when he was creating that energy, the people around him couldn't understand him. They couldn't understand the philosophy. They couldn't. It become a political body.
What was the problem at that
Yeah, the problem at that time was because they were still struggling with the identity, with themselves. They were still struggling to understand who they are. He was talking about colonial mentality. And he was talking about colonial mentality, was talking about decolonization. Because we were in the post-colonialism at that time. And at that time, people were saying like, they talk about, decolonization. But we are not talking about it. It was in practice, it was zero. But he was telling you that, come, look at it, that you are still bearing Matthew. A Yoruba man bearing Matthew is madness. That is it. But at that time, they don't see it. They're all like, no, I am a Christian, and being a Christian, I must bear Matthew. Of course, you can be a Christian, but what is stopping you from bearing your own local name? And so these are all the things we're talking about decolonization. And Fela was a body of philosophy, was a body of idea, was a political system itself. And it's a philosophy for post-colonialism for us to borrow heavily from, and it's also an identity. The quest for freedom and the quest for development. What my fear is this: in the quest for this, we're losing our head, and that's my fear. And I constantly receive a lot of questions from the young ones, and I keep telling them, and essentially my students, like one of the things I usually tell them is, you are being trained to be really, really human being. And a human being is for you to think, and to think very, very deeply, not superficially. And for you to say, okay, if you decide to say, I am not going to think, and for you to accept that this state which you don't want to do will have its own consequences, and for you to accept that these consequences are brought to me by myself, not anybody, and the fact that what you be, what you are, what you're going to be, start from you.
Responsibility.
Your responsibility. So that is just it. That is, of course, we are moving so fast that the world is connected. Firstly, we have, the internet is there. You get connected every 2 seconds. You're already in Europe. You are in Africa. You are this. You are that. But we are losing the thinking process in this process too. And until we begin to say, yes, of course, I'm going to be connected to the world, but I will also think. I will also when I get information about this, I will sit down, think deeply about it, and I'll make it to benefit myself and the outer world, because we are connected.